The message arrived on a Tuesday morning when Jake Martinez was teaching a group of college students how to build proper fire rings in the Montana wilderness. His satellite phone buzzed with an urgent call from the Pentagon, and within 6 hours, he found himself on a military transport heading to Washington, D.C. The officials who met him wore suits that cost more than most people's cars, and they spoke in careful, measured tones about humanity's first contact with alien civilizations. Jake sat in the sterile conference room listening to briefings about the Galactic Expedition Council and their evaluation protocols for newly discovered species. The aliens had been watching Earth for several months, studying human behavior and technology before making official contact 3 weeks ago. Now they wanted to conduct what they called a survival assessment, a standard test given to all species. Seeking membership in their galactic community, the test seemed simple enough. One human representative would be transported to a neutral planet, called Kepler 442c, and given 30 days to survive using only basic tools and natural resources. Previous species had performed adequately by building simple shelters and finding food sources. The aliens viewed it as a peaceful way to evaluate problem-solving skills and adaptability without any real danger. Commander Velkoth, the primary Zephyrian observer assigned to Earth's assessment, had reviewed hundreds of these evaluations. Most species followed predictable patterns. They would spend the first few days exploring their environment, locate water sources, construct basic lean-to shelters, and establish simple foraging routines. The Crystalline Collective had built elegant geometric structures from local minerals. The Verdant Alliance had cultivated impressive gardens using native plant species. The Aquatic Federation had constructed elaborate water filtration systems, but humans were different in ways the commander did not yet understand. When Jake Martinez stepped off the transport ship onto Kepler 442c's surface, Velkoth expected to observe another routine survival demonstration. The human carried standard-issue equipment, a military-grade knife, 50 feet of paracord, basic camping gear, and an emergency beacon for medical evacuation. The planet offered everything needed for survival: dense forests filled with edible plants, clear streams running with fresh water, and wildlife that provided both food sources and materials for tool-making. Jake surveyed the landing zone with eyes that had seen combat zones in 3 different countries. Where Velkoth saw a pleasant wilderness environment perfect for a camping exercise, Jake saw tactical considerations. The small clearing sat in a valley bottom with multiple approach routes, limited visibility of surrounding terrain, and no natural defensive advantages. Water sources were visible but unprotected. High ground dominated the area from 3 directions. Any competent enemy could control this position within hours. The first thing Jake did was move away from the landing zone. He spent 2 hours conducting a detailed reconnaissance of the surrounding area, marking potential water sources, identifying useful plant species, and evaluating the terrain for defensive possibilities. He found what he was looking for on a ridge overlooking the valley, a natural depression surrounded by thick trees, with clear sightlines in multiple directions and access to both water and building materials. Velkoth watched through long-range sensors as the human began his assessment. The behavior seemed unusual but not alarming. Most species took time to explore their environment before settling on a campsite. What puzzled the commander was the systematic way Jake moved through the terrain, stopping frequently to examine sightlines and escape routes rather than focusing on immediate survival needs like water and shelter. By the end of the first day, Jake had established his base camp in the Ridge Depression and completed a preliminary defensive survey of the surrounding area. He identified 3 separate water sources within reasonable distance, located stands of suitable trees for construction materials, and mapped out what he mentally classified as primary and secondary defensive positions. His military training had taught him that proper preparation prevented poor performance, and 30 days was enough time to build something substantial. The alien observers noted that Jake had not yet constructed any shelter, started a fire, or gathered food. This concerned them initially, as most species prioritize these basic survival needs immediately upon arrival. What they did not understand was that Jake was thinking several steps ahead. He was not planning to simply survive for 30 days. He was planning to establish a secure position that could be defended and expanded if necessary. On the second morning, Jake began construction of what Velkoth assumed would be a standard survival shelter. The humans started by clearing a level, area approximately 20 feet square, removing rocks and vegetation with methodical precision. But instead of building upward immediately, Jake began digging. He excavated a drainage system around the perimeter, carved out a fire pit with proper ventilation channels, and created what appeared to be storage areas below ground level. The Zephyrian observers had never seen this approach before. Most species built simple above-ground structures and dealt with weather or drainage issues as they arose. Jake's systematic earth-moving suggested a level of planning that seemed excessive for a temporary survival situation. Commander Velkoth made notes about human thoroughness but remained confident that this was simply cultural preference for over-engineering rather than anything strategically significant. Jake spent the rest of the second day gathering materials. He selected trees not just for size and availability, but for specific structural properties. Hardwoods for load-bearing elements, flexible woods for joints and connections, and straight-grained timber for precise construction work. He harvested bark in specific patterns to preserve the tree's health while obtaining waterproofing materials. His approach to resource gathering showed the same systematic thinking he had applied to site selection and ground preparation. By the third day, Jake's shelter began taking shape in ways that surprised the alien observers. Instead of a simple lean-to or basic cabin, he was constructing what appeared to be a fortified position. The main structure incorporated multiple rooms including sleeping quarters, food storage, and workshop space. More notably, the building was positioned to take advantage of natural defensive features while providing clear observation of potential approach routes. Commander Velkoth found himself reviewing the assessment protocols to ensure he understood the parameters correctly. The survival test was meant to evaluate adaptability and problem-solving skills, not military engineering capabilities. Yet the humans seemed to be approaching the exercise as if preparing for siege warfare rather than a peaceful camping experience. The commander decided to continue observations while noting these unusual characteristics in his preliminary reports. Jake Martinez had no idea that his methodical approach to establishing a secure base camp was causing confusion among alien observers. To him, this was simply proper fieldcraft applied to an unknown environment. 30 days was plenty of time to build something substantial, and he intended to use every hour effectively. Jake woke up on day 4 inside a shelter that would have impressed a military engineer. The structure featured elevated sleeping quarters that kept him dry and warm while providing storage space underneath. Multiple escape routes led from the main building through carefully concealed exits that blended seamlessly with the natural environment. A covered walkway connected the sleeping area to a separate cooking and food preparation space, complete with a stone-lined fire pit that vented smoke. Through a chimney system designed to disperse the smell and visual signature, Commander Velkoth studied the overnight sensor readings with growing confusion. The humans' construction project had progressed faster than any previous test subject in Galactic Council records. Most species spent their first week struggling with basic firemaking and simple shelter construction. Jake had completed what appeared to be a permanent settlement foundation in just 3 days, and he showed no signs of slowing down. The 4th day brought Jake's first encounter with local wildlife. A pack of creatures resembling oversized wolves approached his camp during the early morning hours. These animals had tested previous assessment subjects, usually resulting in hasty retreats to emergency beacons or frantic attempts to build better barriers. Jake observed the pack from his elevated position and immediately began implementing defensive measures he had planned but not yet constructed. Within hours, Jake had installed a perimeter security system that turned his camp into a fortress. He drove sharpened stakes into the ground at angles designed to funnel approaching animals into specific pathways. Using paracord and careful knots, he rigged tripwires that would alert him to movement while creating obstacles for anything trying to approach his position. The system incorporated multiple layers, starting with early warning indicators placed several hundred yards from his main camp and progressing through increasingly serious deterrence as potential threats moved closer. The alien observers watched in fascination as Jake constructed what they recognized as military-grade defensive positions using nothing but primitive tools and natural materials. He dug camouflage pits along likely approach routes, covering them with branches and leaves that would collapse under the weight of large animals while remaining invisible to casual observation. Each pit was positioned to channel surviving attackers toward prepared kill zones where Jake could engage them from protected positions. Jake's engineering background showed clearly in his approach to defensive construction. He built elevated observation posts disguised as natural tree platforms, complete with overhead cover and multiple firing positions. These platforms connected to his main camp through concealed pathways that allowed movement without exposure to outside observation. Emergency supply caches were hidden throughout the area, each one positioned to support different phases of a potential fighting withdrawal. Commander Velkoth found himself completely outside his experience with this assessment. Previous species had focused on basic survival needs, finding food, staying warm, avoiding dangerous wildlife. The humans seemed to be preparing for warfare against an organized military force rather than simply camping in the wilderness. The defensive systems Jake was constructing would challenge even modern military units equipped with advanced technology. The Volf-like creatures returned on day 6, apparently drawn by cooking smells from Jake's camp. This time they encountered a completely different environment than their first visit. The lead animal triggered an early warning system made from balanced stones and metal pieces that created noise, while remaining completely hidden from casual view. As the pack advanced, they found themselves funneled into increasingly narrow pathways by barriers that seemed natural but forced them into predetermined routes. Jake observed the entire approach from his concealed command post, an elevated position that provided tactical oversight of his defensive perimeter while remaining invisible to ground-level observation. He had prepared multiple response options depending on the animal's behavior, ranging from noise deterrence to more serious defensive measures. The pack found themselves dealing with an environment that seemed actively hostile to their presence, complete with obstacles that appeared and disappeared as they moved through the area. The animals eventually withdrew, without making contact with Jake or his main camp structures. Commander Velkoth noted that the human had successfully repelled a significant wildlife threat without using his emergency beacon or suffering any injuries. More importantly, the defensive systems had functioned exactly as designed, demonstrating a level of planning and execution that suggested extensive military training and experience. Jake spent day 7 improving his defensive positions based on lessons learned from the wildlife encounter. He reinforced weak points in his perimeter, added additional early warning systems, and constructed fallback positions that would allow him to conduct a fighting withdrawal if his main defensive line was breached. His approach showed the systematic thinking of someone who had faced similar challenges in considerably more dangerous environments. The food situation required attention, but Jake approached this challenge with the same methodical planning he applied to everything else. Instead of simple foraging or hunting, he designed a comprehensive food security system. He constructed fish traps using woven branches and strategic placement in stream channels. Small game snares were positioned along animal pathways identified. During his initial reconnaissance, a smoking and drying facility allowed him to preserve meat for long-term storage while reducing the smell signature that might attract unwanted wildlife attention. Jake's workshop area evolved into something resembling a primitive manufacturing facility. He had constructed a forge using clay and stones that allowed him to heat-treat metal pieces salvaged from his equipment for tool-making. A workbench provided space for detailed construction projects while tool racks kept his growing collection of specialized implements organized and readily available. The workshop connected to his main shelter through covered walkways that protected him from weather while allowing efficient movement between different work areas. Commander Velkoth realized that his assessment reports were becoming increasingly difficult to categorize. The human was not simply surviving in the wilderness. He was establishing what could only be described as a military outpost complete with defensive systems, manufacturing capabilities, and supply networks. The 30-day assessment period was intended to test basic adaptability, but Jake was demonstrating capabilities that some species took decades to develop. By the end of the first week, Jake's camp had evolved into a fortified compound that dominated the local terrain. His defensive perimeter extended nearly half a mile in all directions, complete with overlapping fields of observation and multiple prepared fighting positions. Supply lines connected his main base to forward observation posts and emergency supply caches. The entire system was designed to support extended operations while providing maximum security against any conceivable threat. Jake Martinez had no way of knowing that his systematic approach to field fortification was rewriting Galactic Council protocols for species assessment. To him, this was simply proper military engineering applied to a wilderness environment. He had 23 days remaining, and he intended to use every hour to improve his position. Day 10 marked the beginning of what Commander Velkoth would later describe as the most remarkable engineering demonstration in Galactic Council history. Jake had moved beyond basic survival and defensive preparations into territory that challenged everything the aliens thought they knew about rapid technological development. His compound now resembled a functioning settlement rather than a temporary camp, complete with infrastructure that some species took generations to achieve. The water system Jake constructed defied every assumption about primitive technology. Using hollow bamboo-like plants native to Kepler 442c, he had built a gravity-fed distribution network that brought fresh water directly to his workshop, cooking area, and living quarters. The system included settling tanks for filtration, overflow channels for flood control, and even a primitive but effective pressure regulation system that maintained consistent flow rates throughout his compound. Jake's engineering background showed most clearly in his approach to mechanical systems. He had identified a fast-flowing stream approximately half a mile from his main camp and constructed what could only be described as a water-powered industrial complex. A carefully designed dam-channeled stream flowed through a wooden wheel system that provided mechanical power for grain processing, tool sharpening, and material preparation. The mill wheel operated continuously, grinding nuts and edible plant materials into flour while powering a bellows system that maintained consistent temperatures in his forge. Commander Velkoth watched through long-range sensors as the human created innovations that challenged fundamental assumptions about technological progression. The Galactic Council had always believed that advanced manufacturing required sophisticated materials and complex tools. Jake was demonstrating that careful engineering and systematic thinking could achieve remarkable results using nothing but natural resources and basic implements. The food preservation systems Jake developed rivaled anything the aliens had seen from pre-industrial civilizations. His smokehouse operated on principles that maximized preservation while minimizing fuel consumption and smoke signature. Temperature and humidity control systems ensured optimal curing conditions for different types of meat and plant materials. A root cellar carved into the hillside provided climate-controlled storage that kept food fresh for extended periods without any technological assistance. Jake's workshop had evolved into something approaching a manufacturing facility. He had constructed specialized tools for every aspect of his operation, from precision cutting implements to measuring devices that allowed accurate construction of complex mechanical systems. A primitive but functional lathe enabled him to create perfectly round wooden components for his water wheel and other mechanical devices. Tool racks held an impressive collection of specialized implements, each one designed for specific tasks and maintained in perfect working condition. The defensive systems continued to evolve throughout the second week. Jake added layers of complexity that turned his compound into something resembling a modern military installation. Concealed observation posts provided overlapping coverage of all approaches while remaining completely invisible to casual inspection. Communication systems using mirrors and reflected sunlight allowed instant coordination between different defensive positions. The entire perimeter was designed to channel attackers into predetermined kill zones while providing defenders with multiple fallback positions and escape routes. Commander Velkoth found himself struggling to categorize what he was observing. The human had constructed infrastructure that exceeded the capabilities of many established civilizations, using nothing but primitive tools and natural materials. More concerning was the systematic way Jake approached each challenge, suggesting that this level of innovation was normal for his species rather than exceptional individual capability. Jake's approach to resource management demonstrated planning that extended far beyond the 30-day assessment period. He had established renewable harvesting systems for all critical materials, ensuring that his operations could continue indefinitely without depleting local resources. Tree harvesting followed sustainable patterns that maintained forest health while providing continuous supplies of construction materials. His fishing and hunting systems were designed to maintain wildlife populations while meeting his nutritional needs. The waste management systems Jake implemented would have impressed environmental engineers from any advanced civilization. Human waste was processed through carefully designed composting systems that eliminated health hazards while producing fertilizer for his expanding garden areas. Food scraps were sorted and processed through different pathways depending on their composition and potential uses. Nothing was wasted, and every byproduct served some useful purpose in his overall operation. Jake's garden areas had expanded into what could only be described as agricultural plots. He had identified edible plants native to Kepler 442c and developed cultivation techniques that dramatically increased their productivity. Irrigation systems delivered precise amounts of water to different crop areas based on their specific needs. Companion planting techniques maximized yields while reducing pest problems and soil depletion. The entire agricultural system was designed to support a much larger population than one person. The communication systems Jake developed using primitive materials demonstrated innovation that challenged alien understanding of technological development. Mirror networks allowed instant signaling between distant observation posts during daylight hours. Sound systems using hollow logs and stretched animal skins provided communication capabilities during darkness or poor weather conditions. Emergency signaling methods ensured that any part of his defensive network could alert all other positions within minutes of detecting threats. Commander Velkoth realized that his regular reports to the Galactic Council were becoming increasingly difficult to explain. What had started as a routine survival assessment was turning into a comprehensive demonstration of rapid civilization building. The human was not simply adapting to his environment, he was systematically transforming it into something that could support advanced operations indefinitely. Jake's metalworking capabilities had progressed to the point where he was producing tools superior to his original equipment. Using ores found in local stream beds and techniques adapted from his military engineering background, he had created cutting implements, fasteners, and mechanical components that exceeded the quality of his standard-issue gear. His forge could achieve temperatures sufficient for working with different types of metals, and his tool-making skills allowed him to create specialized implements for any task. The most impressive achievement came when Jake successfully reverse-engineered several pieces of alien technology that previous assessment subjects had damaged or abandoned. Using careful observation and systematic experimentation, he not only repaired the devices but improved their functionality, using hybrid combinations of alien materials and his own innovations. Commander Velkoth noted that the human had essentially conducted independent research and development using resources that other species had dismissed as unusable. By day 15, Jake's compound had become a case study in rapid technological development that would be analyzed by Galactic Council researchers for decades. What aliens had expected to be a simple camping exercise had evolved into a demonstration of human engineering capabilities that challenged every assumption about primitive technology and resource utilization. Word traveled fast through the Galactic Council networks about the human who was turning a survival assessment into an engineering marvel. By day 18, Commander Velkoth found himself fielding requests from observers representing dozens of different species, all wanting permission to witness the final phase of Earth's evaluation. What had begun as a routine assessment had evolved into the most watched survival demonstration in Council history. Jake remained completely unaware of his growing audience as he continued expanding and improving his compound. The defensive perimeter now extended nearly a full mile in all directions, incorporating natural terrain features into a comprehensive security system that would challenge even advanced military forces. Hidden supply depots were positioned throughout the area, each one stocked with food, tools, and materials sufficient to support extended operations. The entire network was connected by concealed movement routes that allowed rapid redeployment without exposure to outside observation. The electrical system Jake developed using water power and local metallic ores represented a breakthrough that stunned the alien observers. He had constructed a primitive but functional power generation system that provided lighting for his workshop and living areas, while operating tools that required consistent energy input. The generator used principles that some Galactic Council species had taken centuries to discover, yet Jake had developed working systems in less than 3 weeks, using nothing but natural resources and basic hand tools, Commander Velkoth found himself explaining to increasingly senior council officials how a species, classified as barely technological, had demonstrated capabilities that rivaled established civilizations. The human's systematic approach to problem-solving and resource utilization suggested thinking patterns that were fundamentally different from any previously encountered species. Each challenge Jake faced resulted in solutions that were not only effective but often superior to standard approaches used by more advanced civilizations. The domestication program Jake had developed with local wildlife created an early warning system more effective than most technological alternatives. He had identified species with useful characteristics and developed training techniques that turned wild animals into willing partners in his security operations. Birds provided aerial reconnaissance and intruder alerts, while small mammals served as messengers between distant observation posts. The entire animal network operated on principles of mutual benefit rather than simple control, creating partnerships that enhanced both human and animal capabilities. Jake's manufacturing capabilities had expanded to include production of complex mechanical devices using entirely primitive methods. His workshop now contained precision measuring instruments, specialized cutting tools, and assembly equipment that enabled construction of sophisticated machines from basic materials. A primitive but accurate timing system allowed coordination of different manufacturing processes, while quality control procedures ensured consistent results across all production activities. The agricultural systems Jake had established were producing food surpluses that exceeded his immediate needs by substantial margins. His cultivation techniques had transformed wild plant species into productive crops that could support a much larger population than one person. Seed selection and breeding programs were already showing improvements in yield and nutritional content after just 2 growing cycles. The entire food production system was designed for expansion and could easily be scaled up to support a permanent settlement. Commander Velkoth received daily reports from his expanded observation team as they documented innovations that challenged fundamental assumptions about technological development. The human was not simply surviving in a wilderness environment, he was systematically transforming it into something that could support advanced civilization. More troubling was the efficiency with which Jake accomplished these transformations, using resources that other species had dismissed as inadequate for anything. Beyond basic survival, Jake's approach to construction had evolved to include architectural techniques that created structures suitable for permanent occupation rather than temporary shelter. His main buildings incorporated advanced engineering principles that provided superior strength, weather resistance, and functional efficiency compared to typical primitive construction. Foundation systems, load distribution, and environmental control all demonstrated understanding of principles that most species discovered only after centuries of development. The communication networks Jake had established using primitive materials now connected his entire compound through systems that provided instant coordination between all operational areas. Day and night signaling capabilities ensured continuous contact regardless of weather conditions or visibility. Emergency protocols allowed any part of his network to alert all other positions within minutes, while backup systems provided redundancy that guaranteed communications would continue, even if primary methods were compromised. Jake's water management systems had expanded into a comprehensive infrastructure that controlled, distributed, and recycled water throughout his compound with efficiency that impressed even advanced engineering species. Multiple source development ensured reliable supply during any conceivable weather conditions, while filtration and treatment systems provided water quality that exceeded safety standards used by many technological civilizations. The entire network operated automatically once established, requiring minimal maintenance while providing maximum reliability. The tool-making capabilities Jake had developed enabled him to create specialized implements for any task he encountered. His workshop contained cutting tools, measuring devices, fasteners, and mechanical components that exceeded the quality and functionality of his original equipment. More importantly, he had established production systems that could manufacture replacement tools and expand his capabilities as needed for new challenges or opportunities. Commander Velkoth found himself preparing reports that read more like documentation of rapid civilization building than simple survival assessment. The human had created infrastructure, manufacturing capabilities, and operational systems that could support permanent settlement and continued expansion. What aliens had designed as a test of basic adaptability had become a comprehensive demonstration of human engineering and organizational capabilities. Jake's waste processing and recycling systems eliminated virtually all environmental impact from his operations, while converting waste products into useful materials for construction and agriculture. Nothing was discarded without first being evaluated for potential applications in other parts of his operation. The entire compound operated on principles of maximum efficiency and minimal waste that would be difficult to improve even with advanced technology. The defensive installations Jake had constructed represented the culmination of 3 weeks of systematic military engineering applied to wilderness conditions. His compound could now repel organized attacks while providing platforms for offensive operations if necessary. Multiple defensive lines, overlapping fields of fire, and prepared fallback positions created defensive depth that would challenge even modern military units equipped with advanced weapons and technology. As the 30-day assessment period approached its final phase, Jake's compound had evolved into something unprecedented in Galactic Council records. What had started as a simple survival test had become a masterclass in rapid technological development and systematic problem-solving that would influence Council evaluation procedures for generations. The extraction team that arrived on day 30 found themselves approaching what could only be described as a fortified military installation, built entirely from natural materials and human ingenuity. Captain Lisa Andrews, the lead pilot of the recovery shuttle, had to circle the landing zone 3 times before she could identify a safe approach route through Jake's defensive perimeter. What her sensors detected looked more like an established colony than a temporary survival camp. Jake Martinez stood waiting for them on an elevated platform that provided tactical oversight of his entire compound. He wore clothing he had manufactured from local materials, carried tools he had crafted in his own workshop, and displayed the confident bearing of someone who had not merely survived but had thrived in an environment that challenged most species to their limits. His greeting was casual and friendly, as if receiving visitors at a permanent residence rather than completing a 30-day survival assessment. Commander Velkoth accompanied the extraction team, bringing with him a full documentation crew and several senior Galactic Council observers who had insisted on witnessing the conclusion of this unprecedented evaluation. As they toured Jake's compound, the scope of human achievement became clear in ways that challenged every assumption about rapid development capabilities and resource utilization efficiency. The main residential complex featured multiple rooms designed for different functions, each one incorporating engineering principles that maximized comfort and efficiency while using only primitive construction methods. Sleeping quarters included climate control systems that maintained optimal temperature, regardless of outside weather conditions. Workshop areas provided lighting and ventilation that enabled precise work during any time of day or night. Storage facilities kept food, tools, and materials organized and protected while remaining easily accessible for daily operations. Jake demonstrated his water-powered electrical system with obvious pride, explaining how he had identified suitable ores in local stream beds and developed processing techniques that produced functional electrical components. The power generation system operated continuously, providing lighting for interior spaces while running mechanical equipment that automated many routine tasks. Battery storage systems ensured power availability during maintenance periods or unusual weather conditions that might affect primary generation. The agricultural areas impressed the alien observers with their productivity and sophistication. Jake had transformed wild plant species into cultivated crops that produced yields far exceeding natural growth patterns. Irrigation systems delivered precise amounts of water based on each plant's specific needs, while fertilization programs used processed waste materials to maintain soil quality. Seed selection and improvement programs were already showing results after just 4 growing cycles. Captain Andrews found herself documenting construction techniques that exceeded anything she had seen from pre-industrial civilizations during her years of galactic survey work. Jake's buildings incorporated load distribution systems, weather protection, and structural engineering that would provide decades of reliable service. Foundation systems prevented settling and moisture problems, while roofing designs shed water and snow while maintaining structural integrity. Under extreme conditions, the defensive installations represented the most impressive achievement in the compound. Jake's perimeter security extended over 2 square miles and included overlapping observation posts, concealed movement routes, and prepared fighting positions that could repel organized military attacks. Early warning systems provided advance notice of any approaching threats, while communication networks enabled instant coordination between all defensive positions. Supply caches positioned throughout the area ensured sustained operations even if the main compound was compromised. Commander Velkoth observed Jake's casual explanation of his various innovations with growing amazement. The human discussed complex engineering projects as if they were routine camping activities, describing solutions to problems that had challenged civilizations for centuries. What concerned the commander most was Jake's obvious assumption that this level of construction was normal and expected rather than exceptional achievement worthy of special recognition. Jake's manufacturing capabilities had produced tools and equipment that exceeded the quality of his original standard issue gear. His workshop contained precision instruments, specialized cutting tools, and mechanical devices that demonstrated mastery of metallurgy, engineering, and production techniques. Quality control procedures ensured consistent results while continuous improvement programs led to enhanced capabilities with each new project. The waste processing and recycling systems Jake had developed eliminated all environmental impact from his operations while converting waste products into useful materials for other applications. Organic waste became fertilizer for agricultural areas, while metal scraps were reprocessed into new tools and components. Water treatment systems ensured that all discharge met purity standards that exceeded those used by many advanced civilizations. Captain Andrews asked Jake about his plans if the assessment had continued beyond 30 days. His response revealed thinking that extended far beyond simple survival or temporary occupation. Jake had identified several neighboring valleys suitable for expansion and had already begun preliminary surveys for additional settlements. His compound was designed as a base of operations for systematic development of the entire region rather than simply a place to wait out the assessment period. The animal training programs Jake had established created partnerships with local wildlife that enhanced both human and animal capabilities. Birds provided aerial reconnaissance and communication services, while mammals served as messengers and early warning systems. The relationships were based on mutual benefit rather than simple control, creating sustainable partnerships that could continue indefinitely. Commander Velkoth found himself preparing what would become the most significant species evaluation report in Galactic Council history. His classification of humanity as a rapid infrastructure development species came with recommendations for extreme caution in any future interactions. The human had demonstrated capabilities that transformed environments rather than simply adapting to them, suggesting a species that viewed challenges as opportunities for improvement rather than obstacles to be endured. Jake offered to teach his construction and survival techniques to other species, leading to immediate discussions about establishing the first human-led galactic engineering corps. The Council recognized that humanity brought capabilities to the galactic community that could benefit all member species while potentially revolutionizing approaches to colonization and development. The extraction team loaded Jake's personal gear while he conducted a final inspection of his compound. He had arranged for continued operation of essential systems in case the site might be useful for future council activities. His casual attitude toward leaving behind weeks of intensive construction work impressed the observers as much as the construction itself had. As the shuttle lifted off from Kepler 442c, Jake looked down at his compound with satisfaction rather than regret. He had accomplished what he set out to do: demonstrate that humans could not only survive in any environment, but could transform that environment into something better. The 30-day assessment had become proof that humanity deserved recognition, not just as survivors, but as builders capable of turning any challenge into an opportunity for growth and improvement.